Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Key Cities Conference on the Future Skills for Cities. I'm delighted that we've had a very positive attendance and also looking forward to a really interesting set of discussions on how we develop the skills necessary for the future of our cities. My name is Councillor John Merry. I'm Deputy City Mayor of Salford City Council and also lucky enough to chair the National Network of Key Cities. But before we start, I just got a little bit of housekeeping to do. Central to what we do at Key Cities is about collaboration. It's about connecting voices across urban UK, and today is no exception. And I'm hoping that today is going to be a truly interactive session and hope that you will all participate. Each panel will be taking a question and answer session from the audience, so please do share your observations and questions in the chat function, which you should see at the side of your screen. If you're on Twitter and would like to tweet about future skills for cities, you can find our Twitter handle, which is obviously Key Cities. Now, for those of you who are new to us, to Key Cities, we are an all-party network of 25 cities across the country. And one of the strengths of our network is the diversity and expertise does provide, I believe, an authoritative voice for urban living in the UK. Of course, we've got cities of all shapes, sizes and political colours, but what brings us together is our belief that it's cities and city leaders, those in close touch with the challenges and opportunities ingrained in the everyday realities of our communities, who are best placed to revive our workforces, taking a local approach to bridging the skills gap. And I just want to say a word or two about the sort of cities we're talking about. Clearly, we have a very close relationship with core cities, the rather larger conurbations, but we believe that the cities around those core cities in many cases provide centres of innovation and enterprise which are required for taking the skills strategy further. And quantifying the skills gap is the first step, and the scale of the damage of the COVID pandemic is often tough for those of us who've not lived through the intimate decisions that had to be taken. It's difficult to comprehend the enormous damage that's been done, particularly from a city's perspective. Across the labour market, the pandemic created a sharp fall in employment and work, and that exacerbated, I believe, the skill gaps and the stark inequalities within the workforce. And of course, during the pandemic, we also left the European Union. And although we can now determine our own global trade policy, there are enormous barriers, I believe, that are in danger of being created to barriers to trade, investment and migration between the UK. And that will create profound changes, I believe, in the distribution of economic activity. So we have some difficult challenges to face. And of course, against those global trends, we've got the ever accelerating climate crisis, and achieving net zero will require changes that are unprecedented in their scale and scope. And the green policy, of course, will require policies to derive low carbon economic activity, but also investment in human capital and skills. And while this is going to be some difficult problems to solve, I believe it provides enormous opportunities for the future of the British economy. So we believe in Key Cities, the crisis we're facing requires cross-governmental, cross-sector effort, and we believe local authorities should be at the heart of what we're trying to create here, because they do understand their local areas. Imran, over a period of time, has told me a great deal about the economy in Bradford, which is slightly different from the economy in Salford, for example, and requires different priorities. But what we both agree on is the importance of being able to make those local decisions. So we've organised two panels today to explore the many challenges and opportunities ahead. The first panel, which is going to be chaired by Rebecca Long-Bailey, MP for Salford and Eccles, and also joint chair of the Key Cities All Parliamentary Group, will explore how we bridge the skills gap faced by the net zero transition and maximise access to future green opportunities. The second panel, chaired by Councillor Ren Khan, Deputy Leader for Bradford City Council and Skills Lead for Key Cities, will explore how cities can lead the way in supporting communities to reskill and upskill as part of local economic strategies. So before we jump into the first panel, I want to invite Councillor Khan as Key Cities Lead for Skills, Young People and Education to give us a few words. Having worked with Councillor Khan for a number of years, I know how committed he is to trying to face up to this challenge of skills, and his passion for cultivating a skills for life culture within our communities. Fantastic asset to the network, and I'm delighted that he's been heavily involved in organising today's event. So can we please welcome Councillor Ren Khan, please?
Thank you, John, for that kind introduction. So good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Ren Khan, the Deputy Leader of Bradford Council and the Young People, Skills and Education Portfolio Holder for the Key Cities Network. I'd like to join Councillor Mary in welcoming you to this Future Skills for Cities event. I'm really excited to have so many of us coming together today to share and develop our ideas and to hear from our distinguished guest speakers and panellists. As Key Cities, we match the government's levelling up ambitions and commitment to tackling the regional inequalities that we see across the UK. Skills outcomes, both for young people and the local workforce, is clearly one such area of inequality, but as well as reflecting the issue, it is a critical part of the solution and the engine that can drive a sustainable growth that benefits all our regions and communities. Local partnerships with strong local leadership, with the powers and funding to develop and deliver approaches to meet our residents and employers' needs, have the potential to significantly boost local economic outcomes. COVID, as we all know, has left a legacy to be tackled that has amplified the inequalities that were already present in society. It also changed the workplace and how we work, accelerating advances in AI and the automation of tasks and processes. But whilst COVID provided a surge, this is still part of a wider journey we were already embracing in the world of work to deliver our future cities. The global megatrends shaping this future, such as the rise of technology and application of Industry 4.0 that we have started to see, alongside the climate emergency and demographic changes, as well as how Britain trades with the world as the government continues its post-Brexit agenda, will shape how all of us work in the future. Given these challenges and these changes will affect each and every one of us and every area of the country. But there is a real potential in delivering change to address the underlying inequalities and reimagine the UK. Employers need to be able to hire locally with confidence and efficiently. We need a talent pool with the right skills now that will enable employers to drive up productivity, to deliver growth and to create jobs. We also need our residents to have the underpinning digital skills and green skills that will be critical in all jobs moving forward, and to have the career management skills so that they know how to access information and advice, and have the confidence to upskill and reskill so that everyone has the opportunity to fulfil their potential. We should also remember that while skills and economic inequalities are more obvious in some of our larger towns and cities, even in our more affluent areas, the same patterns of disadvantaged groups persist. We need to be able to test and develop approaches that work for all our residents. Key cities are ideally positioned to do this as a national group that can work across political parties to develop, pilot and embed local solutions. This conference today is a key step in that journey. It's a fantastic opportunity to explore how we develop the skills needed for our future cities and how our residents access them. And the discussions we will have will inform our next steps to shape a powerful policy proposition, building on our manifesto, and set out our potential to test policy and programme developments, and then to communicate this throughout the coming year through key channels such as our all-party parliamentary group. So thank you all again for your time this morning. I hope the conference will inspire and challenge us all, and that we can all leave with a renewed energy to find solutions to our shared opportunities. Thank you, John. Back to you.
Thanks, Councillor Khan. once again, you've hit the nail on the head about the conference, and thanks for your perceptive thoughts on what we need to talk about. And now we're going to move on to our first panel on the green economy of the future. I'm going to be bringing in our next chair, Rebecca Long-Bailey MP. I seem to spend most of my life introducing Rebecca in various forms or another to meetings, because she's been the Member of Parliament for Salford and Eccles since 2015 and is co-chair of the Key Cities APPG. I personally am delighted that she agreed to do that role. I think her experience as previously as Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Shadow Education Secretary and Shadow Business Secretary puts her in a very strong position to co-chair the APPG. And I also feel that one of her massive commitments is to working in partnership with local government. I can testify from a personal point of view, having worked with her as a Member of Parliament for Salford, how committed she is to partnership working and in actually trying to implement the ideas that the local council would have. So glad to have you with us, Rebecca, and look forward to you chairing this meeting.
Thanks, John, and thanks for that lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be here today chairing this panel, and as people that are watching know, the panel's entitled "What Skills Are Needed to Build the Green Economy of the Future?" And the green economy of the future is really exciting. You've heard the term Green New Deal, you've heard the term Green Industrial Revolution. And it's not just about tackling climate change and leaving a world for our children and grandchildren to live in healthily. It's also the biggest economic opportunity that we have ever had as a nation to rebuild areas that have seen industrial decline over the last 40 years and to upskill our workforce right across the country. And the problem is, as you've heard already, that we suffer from an acute skills shortage in many sectors, and there are many reasons for this. Firstly, in my view, we've got an industrial strategy that has not tied comprehensively the skills agenda into the needs of the economy. It hasn't supported educational and skills institutions or businesses themselves to be able to equip their workers for the changing landscape that we see. The fourth industrial revolution, the Internet of Things and the digitisation of our workplaces from factories all the way through to offices has left an urgent need to upskill our existing workforce. And I don't think many places have been supported in doing that in the same way that we've seen in other countries, for example, like Germany. And of course, we've got Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic, which has exacerbated the skills shortage significantly. And it's interesting that this week the government has been talking a lot about unemployment figures amidst the cost of living crisis and saying that unemployment is at an all-time low. But unfortunately, behind those figures lies the acute skills shortage and the fact that whilst unemployment levels might be low, we're really not building our economy up and making it resilient for the future. And hopefully that is an issue that our panellists are going to address today. We've got an amazing array of speakers. I'll just introduce them one by one. Firstly, we've got James Robson, who is the co-director of the Centre for Skills, Knowledge and Organisational Performance at the University of Oxford. We've got Judy Ling Wong, who is honorary president of the Black Environment Network and on the Green Advisory Panel for the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. We've got Ben Goodwin, who's head of policy and practice at the Institute for Environmental Management and Assessment. And we've got Nav Chauhan, who's principal at Shipley College, also chair of the West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges and chair of West Yorkshire Skills Network. Without further ado, we'll go into the questions. I'll ask a few opening questions to the panellists. And if anybody watching today has any burning questions that they would like to see addressed, if you could please use the question and answer chat function on your screen. If you don't know how to use that, go into the chat bar and I'll try and have a look at both of them. And we'll try and get our panellists to answer as many questions as possible. So firstly then, the first question that I wanted to ask was, how can cities support the new and existing skills and jobs needed to drive the green transition? And we'll start with James Robson. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Rebecca, and fantastic to be here. Really excited by this this discussion. I think in the first instance, I just want to make three relatively simple points. Firstly, at the risk of being slightly controversial, I think it's really important that we make a distinction between short-term skills shortages and gaps and the longer-term skills required to transform the economy into a greener and more sustainable way of operating. And this is critical because ultimately it's really tempting to focus on skills needs, and employers tend to focus on skills needs with a 2 to 5 year window. But really what I think this leads to is a maintenance of the status quo in terms of economic operations, whereas a green transition, a just green transition, requires deeper and longer term change. And so I think we have to acknowledge that there may be potential for tensions between a short-term skills agenda and a long-term skills agenda. And so we need to think quite critically about skills formation systems and what we mean by supply and demand. And I think problematizing supply and demand is really important in terms of underpinning a just transition. And by supply and demand, I'm talking about skills supply and demand. For the moment, our system is rooted in a short-term approach where the skills formation system really just responds to the demands of employers. But what we're really talking about now is both and. We need to deal with short-term demands, short-term shortages and gaps, but also develop in young people and adults skills that will actually drive change. So skills that are going to be required that will change practices in the economic operations of the labour market. And that brings me on to my second point, that I think to do that, we need to think quite broadly about the skills that we need. It's really tempting to focus in on technical skills when we're talking about green skills. But that, I think, buys into a short-term approach and it's reductive. I think more broadly, we need to think about the skills that people need to deal with a changing economy and a changing labour market, and that requires flexibility. And so the skills formation system to deal with longer-term economic transformation, I think, needs to define green skills in terms of both technical needs and longer-term flexible employability skills. And that's things like digital skills, communication, all of these things enable people to navigate the labour market successfully. But I think we also need to think about competencies and knowledge linked to sustainability that actually embed sustainable values within the workforce. And fourthly, really importantly, in terms of these skills, I think underpinning green skills is a need to continue to learn. Clearly, there's going to be technological changes in the next 10 to 20, 50 years. We're talking about the changing nature of the labour market all the time and people needing new skills. And so any kind of green transition requires constant adaptation within the workforce. And so a disposition towards CPD is, I think, an absolute underpinning competence that everybody needs to develop, and that needs to underpin all education and training. And so very briefly, my third and final point is that I think this requires quite a radical shift in terms of how we develop our education and training systems. I think critical to this is thinking strategically and holistically about tertiary systems. And that means helping the different parts of the education and training sector, so FE, HE, secondary, to work in complementary manners rather than in competition. At the moment, structures place them in competition for students, for funding, for all kinds of different resources. And I think the only way that we can deal with both short-term and longer-term skills needs is through systems-based thinking, and that requires a shift of underpinning policy logic. And this is where I think key cities come in. It's the ability of key cities to create pockets of systems-based thinking and systems-based working that locally can deal with these short-term and longer-term needs.
Thanks, James. That's brilliant. And the same question to Judy. How can cities support the new and existing skills and jobs needed to drive the green transition? Over to you.
I would like to talk about jobs in the context of apprenticeships. It's a very different route where people learn in situ, and often it is a much more exciting way to learn. There's a role for multiple sectors to play in order to enable the volume and quality training, such as apprenticeships, to become opportunities that are accessible to everyone. The government is talking about 2 million green jobs. That is a lot of jobs. Many of them will be very well paid. Making the links to switch on the contribution of people to make the green transition is about having jobs. That is crucial. If I look at the list of endorsed apprenticeship standards, and I'm the chair of the Green Advisory Panel doing that work, I can see that the range of jobs offered is often not known to people. For example, in apprenticeships, people might know about being a smart home technician or countryside ranger, but they might never have heard about green jobs such as a data technician, a software tester, a corporate responsibility and sustainability practitioner, or an agriculture and horticulture professional advisor. People cannot choose to be part of the green transition unless they know more about what it means. It includes government having to create a climate for increased business confidence, but also on the community side, we must spread the word about the opportunities available. Career services, community groups themselves, youth organizations, teachers and parents need to be all part of the picture. I want to emphasize reaching young people. Once they are in secondary school, it is only a few years before they can enter the workforce and take up an apprenticeship. They need to know the range of jobs so they can begin to be excited and visualize being in green jobs. You know, having a green job is about devoting your entire work life to helping the world. It is a great thing, and they need to know that.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Judy. And next, Ben, over to you. Same question.
Thanks, Rebecca, and good morning, everyone. I think for me, what's sort of clearly obvious is that we need more green jobs and skills in our cities in order to deliver our long-term climate and environmental targets. If we don't have those jobs and skills within our cities, we simply won't be able to achieve those targets. And what this means in practice is more jobs that directly support green outcomes, but also more skills that indirectly support those same outcomes. So this is job roles in all cities, from finance and procurement through to things like communications and marketing, manufacturing and infrastructure, so that all job roles can be seen to be mainstreaming environmental considerations into how business is done, and therefore all jobs are that little bit greener and playing their role in that green economy of the future. So recently with Deloitte, IEMA published a report and a suite of training tools to help organisations across the green economy to ensure that their workforces are ready to play their part. And I think this initiative comes at a really critical time. IEMA commissioned YouGov to undertake some public opinion polling around this agenda. And the poll found that 56% of British adults say they've never heard of the term green job, while 64% don't understand the term green skills. In addition, 65% of people said they don't have, or at least they perceive that they don't have access to green skills and training through their employer. So we're starting a pretty low bar here based on those different figures from the public opinion poll that we ran. So clearly there is a big comms piece around this agenda that needs to take place in order to drive this through. And they were the sort of key points that I wanted to make initially, Rebecca. So back to you.
Thanks, Ben. That's brilliant. And finally, Nav, same question to you.
Many thanks, and I think there's some amazing points made by all the contributors so far. I mean, I think the issue that I have sometimes is, what is a green job? Ben mentioned that idea of all jobs are a bit greener. Maybe there aren't going to be a whole load of green jobs. Maybe there's just going to be jobs that involve some amount of green element training around them. So if you're an engineer, you need to be designing systems that have got some kind of focus for the new economy in the new world. And I would see green skills as cutting across everything that we deliver. Every architect is going to be a green job. Every transport technician is going to be a green job. And maybe we're creating a false divide by suggesting that, that there are a bunch of new green jobs that will be very different to what has come before. I think that the interesting point from key cities and that those issues of place are that with devolution, or aspects of devolution that certainly occurred across West Yorkshire and Manchester, we have the opportunity to perhaps marshal resources that can be targeted towards skills. And I do not doubt the importance of schools and universities in developing those skills. And they're across the piece. It's about lifelong learning, it's maths, it's language skills, it's digital skills. But I would want to highlight the role of colleges in this. I am coming towards the end of my career, and I'll make a few decisions over the next few months that might impinge on the future of young people in Bradford. But I know that I've spent the last 25 years cutting costs and squeezing as much as I can out of staff within colleges. I personally believe that FE colleges could be the agent of change for an adult workforce, but also for half of the young people that come to the education system. And I'd like to see some of that marshalling, of course, resources targeted towards colleges, because I truly think we're the ones that can deliver the green skills for the future.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Nav. I've got another few questions, and then we'll go into questions from our audience, because I can see we've got some brilliant ones coming in already. So my question to everybody is, we've talked about briefly which jobs in the UK have the potential to be green. And I'm a big believer, as I think some of the panelists are, that every single job in the UK has to be a green job if we're going to be able to tackle the climate emergency and make sure that people feel the benefits of tackling the climate emergency. So firstly, what are the biggest barriers to greening every single job in the UK? And secondly, if you could be Prime Minister for a day, what would you roll forward as your key priorities to ensure that every single worker in the UK can take part in the green transition, and we can ensure that it's a just transition for everyone? And I'll start with James. Sorry to put you on the spot, James.
That's okay. I mean, it's a really important question, and this I completely agree with you, Rebecca, and the other panel. Every job, I think that's really important, or at least contributing to a more sustainable economy. But I think we should be cautious about how we define green jobs. And I think Ben highlighted this, that there's a lot of muddiness around that, and so it's really important to think in quite detailed ways about the differences between new green jobs that require new skills, greening existing jobs that require additional skills, and just shifting the underpinning architecture around jobs which makes them more green. I think you can use the example of the construction industry really nicely here, as it illustrates those sort of three categories. The first one, we can talk about retrofit coordinators, right? New jobs, new skills. The second category, we can talk about maybe plumbers installing heat pumps, same job, new skills. But then there's a whole range of other jobs, like say a carpenter working on a building site, where they're essentially doing the same kinds of work, they're using the same sorts of skills, but if you shift the underpinning structure that they work in, so the building site is focused on developing green buildings, it's it's managed by somebody who brings in a more sustainable set of building materials. It's rooted in green values and green agendas, then that job becomes green, even though the job itself hasn't changed and the skills needs haven't changed. I think that's the biggest challenge. It's changing the underpinning labour market architecture that will lead to that shift. That doesn't require individual change, that requires changes to operations and economic logics. And so, yeah, I think that requires extensive and industry-specific debate. So if I were Prime Minister for a day, I think actually that debate within industry is critical. I think actually putting people, working with appropriate industry-specific bodies to define and put in place probably some kind of roadmap to how you shift the underpinning architecture that will lead to that fundamental labour market change that means that all jobs can become green, rather than sort of playing around with, okay, we'll create a few specifically new green jobs or we'll green other ones. It's that big fundamental shift that will have the most impact, I think.
Brilliant, thanks, James. Judy.
Well, any job can be greener. Firstly, we must create an atmosphere for change. But, it is not that simple, because in wanting to be green and having the knowledge and skills to do it is another thing. So we must support employers with information to work through all the elements of the jobs, the way things are produced, the materials they choose, and so on, in order to maximize their green credentials. The Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education has published a sustainability framework to help employers to do this. There are organizations leading the way, using all kinds of things to make sure they're green. For example, at UCL Hospital Trust, they have declared a climate emergency, and they're working through all their processes, including how they choose what they buy, the drugs, the materials used in surgery, how they are transported and so on, in order to have less impact on the environment. So it's a thorough thing you need to do when you want to be green, not simple. And something like that sustainability framework is a good starting point, and it's not going to be easy.
Judy, Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I think for me, it goes back to some of the YouGov stats that I pulled out in my opening remarks. For me, the biggest challenge here is the awareness building and the education piece. We can see from those YouGov stats that ordinary members of the public simply don't understand what green jobs are, what green skills are, and how they could play a part in the jobs that and the roles that they're undertaking on a daily basis. So it's informing and educating people about what they can do. And I mean, in terms, if I was the PM, I think what I would be looking at is some sort of awareness campaign that looks to build on the successes of things like the health and safety drives that went through in the 70s and 80s, so that health and safety became commonplace and part of workplace culture. With people no longer batting an eyelid about health and safety. I think there's an opportunity here for us to do something similar within the environmental context as well. So that's where I'd be putting my focus.
Great, thanks, Ben. And Nav.
Thanks. So I mean, changing the world's quite a difficult business, isn't it? Many of the barriers, and if you think about awareness raising on its own, we've been trying to do it about issues of diet for the last 20 odd years, many a health campaign, and it doesn't seem to be working. Perhaps rather than a barrier, we think about an opportunity that we have, that there's a bit of an energy crisis going on, and I think every household is going to be suffering financially over the next year. Perhaps if I was Prime Minister for the day, I'd obviously invest more in further education. I mean, why wouldn't you? But the other one would be to create the economic environment where retrofitting houses made financial sense to all concerned, whether that's local councils, housing associations, or the individuals residing in dwellings. That would bring in its wake a whole set of skills training and opportunities and economic opportunities for retrofitting companies.
Thanks, Nav. That's brilliant. Now, we've got so many good questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to go straight into audience questions to try and cover as many as I possibly can. And what I'll do for the panelists is I'll try and group a few questions together so that you can cover as many topics as you like. And if there's a burning issue that you want to come back on, just give me a wave and I'll make sure that you're brought in. So without further ado then, we've got a question from John Stankham who says, what do you think will be the fastest growing green jobs over the next 5 years for young people and adults to consider? We've got a question from Debbie Brown who says, how connected is the education system into preparing a pipeline into these jobs? And then we've got a question from Suhel Mia who says, what can be done to support the vulnerable groups, those in poverty, etc., to access education upskilling for access to green jobs? Often those groups have many barriers and they can be further disadvantaged in the future. So that's 3 questions for starters. Who would like to put themselves forward first so I don't have to pick on anyone? Give me a wave. Judy, we'll start with you.
I would like to talk about vulnerable groups. I think the key, as always, and we all do this, we all say education is the answer because we all have to go to school. And it is really important that in schools that people are encouraged to think of different routes into really well-paid jobs. You know, the images of apprenticeship is really archaic, you know, and we need to bring it right into the 21st century image of really fantastic range of jobs. So that the ones that are obvious, I've already talked about, you know, technicians or putting solar panels on roofs and so on. But the other things are so much needed, are not even in people's minds, and they are well paid and they can be done. People are surprised through the apprenticeship route. For example, artificial intelligence data specialist. Now, who knew that that could be an apprenticeship? And that straight from school you can go into it. And a lot of people do not know that apprenticeships can last 5 years and be degree level. And therefore you will be very well paid. And people also don't know that many of these so-called supportive technological and digital jobs actually are very much needed by industry, the analytical side, the software building side, and so on. And that they can be done and be preferred by employers to have come through the apprenticeship route. They nurture you to work in the way they need in industry. You don't go off and just study the mechanics and then come into industry without knowing anything. Employers prefer it. So all these things need to be known as choices and be seen as great possibilities to look forward to.
Brilliant, thanks Judy. Who would like to come in next? Ben, did you have your hand up before?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that first question, Rebecca, around where are the sort of sectors where we've got the fastest growing numbers of green jobs. I think this is an interesting question and one that's quite often asked when we're having these conversations about green jobs and green skills, but I don't think there's necessarily a simple answer. I think there's pockets of success in all different industries right across the economy, but in those same industries there's also issues and challenges. So if you take the energy sector, for example, you know, you've had sustained growth in roles associated with renewable power over the last 10 to 15 years. But then equally, when you look at the heating part of the energy sector, that's miles behind. So it's a case of trying to really, again, going back to that narrative that all of the panelists were referring to in the opening remarks. It's a case of going back to that piece around creating an all jobs green culture within every industry of the economy, because we can point, as I say, pretty much to every industry in the economy, with the exception of some of the harder to abate sectors, whereby there is some success, but also there are still existing challenges. So we've got to drive this all jobs greener narrative right the way through the economy, and obviously, you know, within the context of today's discussion, that applies to cities as well, and employers in cities and services in cities. So I think that would be, yeah, my perspective on the first question, at least.
Thanks, Ben. Nav?
Thanks very much. I can tell you where in West Yorkshire we're putting our bets on where those new green jobs are coming. Together we've we're trying to set up a set of hubs to support electric transport and retrofitting. So we're presuming that the main jobs and the main aspect for opportunities are in those two areas. But there are elements of doubt in there. You know, if you think about electric transport, you think about the different car models that are coming out, they'll definitely need support, and then that follows on for jobs to electrical charging points. You know, imagine streets that have all got electrical charging points coming on, there'll be many a job involved in that. But I was reading last week about a different form where rather than charging your battery, you just replaced your battery, you took it out and a new one was put in. And that could be the future. And so although we are putting investment into those jobs, the green world is still a moving feast. A few years ago we were talking about hydrogen as being the main plank of green power for transport, and there's still elements of that within the economy. And so we are jumping in with both feet, but at the same time I do worry that maybe the economy is going to go off in a completely different action, and that's why it's so important. You know, we were talking about place-based leadership. It's about a collective intelligence that we know where the future's coming as far as we can, because we could be in a completely different place in 10 years' time, which doesn't help anybody plan for anything, but we've just got to be nimble.
Thanks, Nav. James?
I'm happy to address the second question about systems, whether how connected our education system is. I think it's not connected enough. I think I said in my opening remarks that the links between FE and HE are not strong enough, and I'm sure, you know, Nav would be able to talk to this, but the sort of massive underinvestment in FE is really problematic. But probably more problematic is the fact that those two parts of the sector, FE and HE, are positioned in competition with each other, and, you know, compete for resources, as I said. And so actually without complementarity and connection, you know, we're not going to have a strategic approach to dealing with skills. And I think HE does need to deal with the skills. It is important. FE is really important. I completely agree with Nav on this. FE is absolutely essential to provide those skills needed for short-term needs and longer-term needs. But so is HE, and HE also, through its research function, drives innovation and you know, sort of skills ecosystems at a local level. And so connection between both parts of the E&T system is really important, and I don't think we're getting that enough at the moment. Having said that, there are pockets of it within regions and within cities where universities go against the underpinning policy architecture of competition in quasi-markets and do deliberately work together in collaboration, and where that happens is really positive, and, you know, really focused on local needs.
That's brilliant. Thanks, James. Right, we've got some more brilliant questions. The next one is from Joe Walby, who is CEO of Mustard Charity in Greater Manchester and Salford. It's a charity that combats poverty and prevents homelessness. And Joe asks, how do we train our leaders in the community like me to take advantage of what seems like an academic-led industry, which appears exclusive and hard to engage with? Then we've got a brilliant question from Emma Kay, who says, hi panel, do you think the changes to the lifelong learning loan will allow for more and different learners to engage in skills development? That's a really good question, Emma. Then we've got a question from Jessica Pathak, who says, which organisations are making most progress in providing green skills development? That's three really good questions. Which organisations are leading and providing the most progress in green skills development? What do you think about the lifelong learning loan? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Do we need to see a more comprehensive strategy from the government, like a grant, to make sure everyone can access the skills agenda? Or do you think the lifelong learning loan is good? And how do we train our leaders in the community to take advantage of the green innovations and skills of the future in an industry that many feel is quite hard to engage with already? So who wants to start on that? Give me a wave. Ben.
Thanks, Rebecca. So I'm happy to have a go at the first question that was asked around leaders in the community. I think there's a role for organisations like mine, IEMA, but likewise other organisations working in a similar space, to begin to tailor their training programs and their training offerings so that they aren't just focused at professionals working within green roles. I think, you know, we've been guilty as professional bodies of doing that. But if we're going to talk the talk about mainstreaming the green economy and, you know, every job being that little bit more greener, we've got to put our money where our mouth is as well, and actually create programs and provisions to help people within communities right up and down the country to actually understand what green skills are, what green jobs are, and how we can then train them to participate in the green economy of the future. So I think we need more introductory level training courses to be on offer right across the different types of organisations and institutions within the country that offer those types of services. So, you know, as much as it is about greening the economy and all jobs greener, we actually need to create training provision that matches up with that.
Brilliant, thanks Ben. Judy? And then Nav.
I think leadership is really important, and people who have that natural leadership especially must be able to visualize themselves into industry. So we have this image of industry producing everything and so on. But goodness, within industry, we need management, we need project control, we need leadership in how things are done. And in apprenticeships, again, people will be surprised that we have supportive occupational jobs such as project manager, to get people to really work efficiently and be managed well and be well paid, and to be able to go into that as an apprenticeship, because these things you've got to learn on the job. And another one I would like to name is a project controls professional, which ensures that multifaceted engineering and infrastructural projects deliver successfully and safely on time and with cost and quality. Those are great demands, and it needs leadership qualities and vision to do that. As much as this is practical, it combines those qualities and can be very exciting. Imagine you come out of school and you can go into training to be a manager, to be a control professional and so on. This is something that I think more young people especially should know about and aspire to. And these apprenticeships are not short, they're 3 to 5 years, they're degree level, but being in industry and seeing it happen and being there to be trained to lead, I think that is really exciting.
Thanks, Judy. Nav.
Many thanks. So I just thought I'd talk about the lifelong learning loan. But for those that don't know it, it's coming in 24-25. And it'll be an opportunity for every adult to get a low-cost loan to put towards training, which sounds a very positive piece. But we have had loans in the FE education system for a while for shorter courses. It's interesting that they've been most popular where there's a direct route to a job. So accountancy has been on top of the list. My own institution does rail technology, so jobs where you can say that get this qualification and you'll walk into a job as a track engineer. You might also be interested to know that dog grooming is quite a popular one as well. But there's that set of vocational training skills that get you straight into a job. I think where the problem might be for the green industry is that collectively we don't know where those jobs are, how to define them, and then the training route. So if those jobs do appear, whether they're apprenticeships or whether they're straight off full-time jobs, would need to create a stepping stone of qualifications for people to get into those opportunities to create the demand. And I think that probably leads to a bigger issue, is that perhaps as a society we need to think more seriously about lifelong learning and the idea that everybody should be retraining through their working careers. Given that I'm coming towards the end of mine, maybe that's an easy thing for me to say.
You don't look old enough to be coming to the end of your career now. James, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the question about organisations hasn't been addressed, so maybe I'll quickly respond to that. So organisations doing good work or making progress in this area is really tough to answer, because across all different kinds of industries, there are individual organisations who are making a real impact. And let's go back to construction. There are individual organisations, and if we look at training providers as well, there are innovative organisations providing innovative training models. But ironically, I think looking at the big picture, we can look at the business world, not necessarily a sort of context that you would associate with green working, but I've been doing some work with about a third of the FTSE 100 CEOs and chairs, and discussing with them values-led capitalism and stakeholder-based capitalism. And I think that, at the top, at the leadership level, there's some really exciting work and discussion going on about how you embed values-based approaches to the ways in which your organisation works. And I think it's those kinds of values-based conversations are the way in which you can then bring in the green agenda and bring in green values and start to actually think about shifting operations to be much more sustainable. So I think there's actually quite a lot to be learned from those top level discussions in business about values-based work and stakeholder capitalism.
Thanks, James. Judy, just before I come back to you, I've got one specific question that's just for you from Emma Kay, in addition to whatever you're about to say. And Emma asks you, do you think, because she says you make very interesting points on understanding what the green jobs are and what the skills are, but do you think there needs to be a national campaign supported by local city campaigns to show the options that are available, the skills that lead to those jobs, and how they can be supported financially to get those skills? Over to you.
Okay, I'll answer both those questions. First, I was going to talk about the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. They are being tasked through the advice of the Green Advisory Panel to both endorse existing apprenticeships that are green jobs already for the net zero transition, at the same time to create new apprenticeship standards with employers. And I just would like to say that the apprenticeship standard is a kind of gold standard of training in apprenticeships, where 80% of the time you are inside the job and 20% you are in FE colleges and so on, studying. So it's a thing that allows theory and practice to come together, and we're working with employers to create new apprenticeships as they are needed. And these apprenticeships being created are very serious. It takes nearly 2 years to create a new apprenticeship. It is that stringent. And when they are done, they need to be promoted and so on. So in terms of the second thing, it's, well, I'm all for a campaign. I think it's time, it's urgent for a campaign. If the government has assessed the situation only around net zero, and green jobs is not just around net zero, it's about sustainability as a whole. Just around net zero, the government says we need 2 million of them. My goodness, that is a lot of jobs. And if we are going to get people into them, my goodness, every year a tranche of young people is coming out ready, looking for jobs. So it is really urgent that we really promote jobs. And I would like businesses also to go into schools. For example, there's an organization called Speakers for Schools. Now, businesses interested in having a role, especially if they're local businesses, to go into schools and talk about jobs in the most real way you can, a local, real green job that can make a big difference. But the campaign must think of moving on all these fronts, involving businesses, involving local authorities, and all kinds of sectors, like the very green environmental sector, which is about outdoor jobs. And we're talking about we need more greenery in order to tackle net zero. And then all the practicalities like smart meters and all that, electrical vehicles and so on. And then the management side, don't forget that leadership and management side. So the spectrum is not known to people, and we must expose that range of green jobs so that people can be excited and head for them.
Thanks, Judy, that's brilliant. Now we've got 5 minutes to sum up, and I've got a few more questions. So please, panelists, answer the questions if you can, and if there's anything you want to add in your final summing up that will transform the world or spur us all on to go out and start demanding this skills revolution alongside the green industrial revolution, then now's your time, because you've got many people watching today that can go out into their communities. So last few questions then. We've got Peter in Salford who says, where do you expect to see the biggest growth in terms of demand for green skills and jobs? We've got a question from Rachel Todd who says, what can councils do to promote the provision of training in green skills? We've got a question from Emma Kay who said, how should the government promote collaboration and not competition between higher education and further education? And there's a special question from Emma Kay to Nav about the lifelong learning known, and it's open to everybody as well. Is that Emma personally thinks that we need a national campaign to let people know that it's available, particularly in those communities who don't have a tradition of higher education and further education. It won't make a change if people don't know about it, or if people don't understand, or are from a community where a loan turns them off straight away. So who would like to go first? Judy.
Yeah, just very short to say that, you know, in terms of where jobs are, sometimes jobs are location fixed. If you want to do things about assembling wind turbines, you will go to Scotland. And you might be excited about going to Scotland. So it depends on jobs and where it is. But certainly in terms of growth, the assessment is already 2 million jobs is a hell of a lot of jobs. So let's look for them and let's have a national campaign, promote them and get people to go into these jobs to help us.
Ben.
Yeah, just to agree with Judy on the location point. Now that's certainly something that we see at IEMA. In terms of some specific sectors though, where we're seeing quite a lot of demand for green skills and green knowledge, certainly in finance and procurement, in those two areas, I think those services are starting to come alive to the fact that this agenda is real and this agenda is happening, and we get a lot of inquiries from businesses working in financial services and procurement and legal actually for our training courses, and for us to provide insights and guidance on how they might upskill their workforces in order to be ready to contribute to the green economy going forward. So there's certainly some of the trends that we're seeing.
Thanks, Ben. James.
So very briefly, in terms of governments promoting collaboration between FE and HE, I think just looking to Scotland is really useful here. Scotland are developing a joined up tertiary system, and the Scottish Funding Council have produced really clear guidance which celebrates the diversity of offerings of FE and HE, and each offering fits into an overarching strategic agenda. And so I think keeping that in mind and investing properly in both sectors is critical.
Thanks, James. And Nav.
Many thanks. On the place-based thing, trying to manage those relationships with between FE and HEs, not straightforward. We're always polite to face, but what goes on behind outside of the meetings is a different thing. And if councils want to have a good effect, it'd be about being the honest vocal within the middle, and perhaps encouraging those relationships for the betterment of all. In terms of the direct questions about lifelong learning loan, yes, absolutely would support a national campaign. And if it's centered around green skills, then all the better. But if we are going to do that, we will need a set of qualifications that lead somewhere. that lead on to jobs, because that's what will encourage people to take up those loans. And to do that, which green jobs are available, and to do that you need organisations like Key Cities to have that intelligence that you know where those future jobs are coming from.
Brilliant, thanks Nav. And I'm really sorry to say that's the end of our first panel, and the questions are still coming in, which is a good sign, because it means people are engaged and they're quite excited about what our panelists have been saying, as am I. And I want to say a huge thanks to all of our panelists for giving their time today, to Dame, to Judy, to Ben, to Nav. I think it's been a really, really exciting discussion. I think we could probably do with a whole day on green industry and green skills, if I'm honest, and a just transition and the Green New Deal as a whole. But maybe that's an idea for Key Cities to think about for the future. But thank you to everybody who participated in the discussion and for your brilliant questions. And I'll now hand over to John Merry.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's always a pleasure to echo what you've said about the particular panel that we've had. Thanks to you, James, Judy, Nav and Ben for that discussion about the challenges we face. And I suppose the second part of it is actually following on very nicely from that. Because one of my contentions is that politicians at their best are engineers rather than scientists. You know, they have to deal with practical problems, listen to the discussions that are taking place around them and apply them to their local communities. And the other half of the double act we're doing today, Councillor Khan, will be chairing our next panel on skills for life. And so it's over to you, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Councillor Merry, and good morning again, everybody. So thank you for your contribution so far. I think the first panel was actually really interesting. It was a really interesting discussion. And I think we've got some great positive insights to take away and work from. I'd now like to start our second panel of the morning, which is entitled Skills for Life, Never Too Late. I'm sure this will again be a very rich discussion, and we have another fantastic group of distinguished panelists who I will introduce to you shortly. However, I quickly just wanted to take a few moments to share some reflections on the strategic approach that we've taken in Bradford. I, like many of my Key Cities colleagues, passionately believe that councils need to be at the very centre of the skills system locally, and to ensure that we are making improvements in residents' outcomes and helping businesses to grow. But we and our partners are hindered by a complex skills system that fails both employers looking to recruit or develop talent and individuals who are trying to get into or progress in work. Fundamentally, there are too many interventions, incentives, brands and providers in the same space, and this is further complicated by rigid and confusing eligibility rules for people and businesses. Simplifying the offer is a key goal for us, and through our Skills House brand, we are working towards a single point of entry for individuals of any age or employers of any type. Skills House is a partnership of education, public and anchor organisations that helps businesses source talent locally. We support all our communities to benefit from economic opportunities through a range of employment support programmes and by enabling people to upskill and reskill. We have used council investment to leverage resources into Skills House from local, regional, national and European funds, meaning we can develop bespoke solutions for employers and individuals alike. Our all-age approach to careers provision supports positive, informed and non-stereotype choices, and most importantly helps residents to navigate the system and acquire the skills they need. This is also a key enabler for our local employers to build more inclusive workforces where all employees are empowered to progress. The Council has invested significantly in the partnership to develop a multi-agency model in the heart of our communities that especially enables us to engage directly with hard-to-reach residents and engage them in learning. This means that irrespective of age, background or employment status, our residents have a trusted brand to access career development support. We can then put in place individual pathways, progressing through the local support offer into good jobs and careers that match residents' aspirations. Whilst we are proud of the progress we have made, we still have a long journey and are keen, through the Key Cities network, to test out ideas on how we can further build on the approach and share our learning to date. So I'd now like to move on to introducing our panellists and hear about some of the work and experiences before opening the conversation out for wider discussion. So we have with us today Tom Stannard, Chief Executive of Salford City Council and Greater Manchester Portfolio Lead for Education, Skills, Work and Apprentices. We've also got Kate Rogerson, Vice President, Academic Provision, Salford City Colleges, Paul Birtles, Operations Director at Produmax, and Mo Isap, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Info Group, Host and Skills City. So welcome to all the panel today, and thank you for taking part in this discussion. As with the first panel, I have a number of questions to start with, then we'll open it up for wider audience participation. So please get those questions in. So our first question, which I will ask all of you to consider responding to, is how can cities lead the way in supporting communities to reskill and upskill as part of local economic strategies? And we'll go to Tom first with that question, please.
Imran, thanks, and thanks very much for having me here today as part of the panel. It's been a really good discussion so far, and I think a number of things have come up in the earlier panel that are very relevant to this, the different sectors emerging in the green transition, new economy of the future. I'm particularly really pleased to have heard from Nav and to have Kate on this panel as well, representing further education, because I think the role of colleges in this is, in my view, and I'll be frank about it, grossly underestimated, grossly and historically undervalued, and needs to come back to the fore of how we're approaching this in localities. And I think with that in mind, Imran, to kind of answer the question directly, the answer to how cities can really tackle this agenda proactively, forcefully and with impact is one simple word, and that's partnerships. We know there is a scarcity of resource at national level. We know there has been, I think, as you've very eloquently highlighted in your introduction, Imran, a fracture of policy around this, and which has essentially led over the last 15 to 20 years to an almost impossibly complex system to navigate, both from the perspective of the learner, but also, and crucially, from the perspective of employers. And I think partnerships are really the only antidote to that, and where those happen effectively, they navigate and assist navigation for two, in my view, critical cohorts in this. The first is young people and school leavers, people coming into the labour market for the first time. The second, and the very important, and I would say the very often neglected cohort, is adult learners, people already in employment, people already in the world of work at the present time. And it's really interesting, Imran, to hear some of the practice in Bradford, which I think replicates some of the areas of the country that are approaching that well. I think key to partnerships is having a plurality of providers around the table, in that it's not just about higher education institutions, and it cannot just be, in my opinion, about promoting further direct pathways into and out of higher education. We know that in many cases that does not suit what employers need. And the key example we often give in the city of Salford, which I'm sure Mo Isap will talk about far more eloquently than I'm ever able to, is in and around digital tech, and particularly our immersive AI, gaming and esports sector, where if you're coming to that sector from, for example, a 3-year academic program in computer science, you will be grossly ill-equipped for those worlds of work compared to, for instance, one of our advanced skill boot camps, which are far shorter programs and far more capable of adaptation to employer needs. I think the final thing I'd say, Imran, that's got to assist in this is the absence of a coherent national strategy around information, advice and guidance, and particularly around brokerage. And that's all the more important for the adult cohort and the lifelong learner market. One of the things we're doing in Salford is putting an additional £1.5 million per annum over the next 3 years into exactly that activity, to help working age people who are currently either unemployed or underemployed in low skill, low wage sectors of the local economy, to help them to navigate the system back into pathways to retraining, therefore to improve their earnings and employability prospects in those emergent sectors of the future. And a lot of that is in digital, in AI and so on, and in the green tech sectors we talked about earlier this morning. It's in the realms of the great unknown. Some of those things you can't define and shouldn't attempt to define, and nor should you attempt to set a fixed curriculum in skills and training terms for those sectors of the future. They will change by their nature. The jobs that those developers are demanding in 6 to 12 months' time will be very, very different to the jobs that they're hiring to today. And I think if we don't have an adaptive curriculum that sits around that, we are at a loss, and we will continue to see those pathways complicated for people navigating the system into the future. If I can just make one final quick plea, Imran, it is also that I do think in skills terms, we need to think about social mobility and social progress in its broadest possible sense in this. And one of my key pleas on these platforms is always, as well as not forgetting adults and the lifelong learner cohort, is not devaluing curriculum relevance to jobs and employers by simply looking at that kind of utilitarian approach that says everything has got to have a direct pathway from curriculum into employment. There is a huge and enormous economic, cultural and social value to simply learning for learning's sake. And I think what's happening in higher education and in further education that's actually stripping out areas of the curriculum that have a less obvious direct pathway into employment is leaving those sectors and the economy and society much the poorer for it. And again, one of the key examples is actually a general mathematics graduate or person who's done very well in mathematics A-level will actually be a much, much better hire in the digital sector these days than someone who's done a very fixed computer science curriculum for 3 or 4 years. So I'll leave that thought with you, but adults very important, learning for learning's sake very important. The whole sector, the whole issue we're talking about today, crucial for cities in future economic, social and cultural development. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Tom. I mean, that's a very comprehensive response, and I actually probably want to comment on a lot of what you've said, but I am conscious of time. We've got a lot to get through. So I'm going to move swiftly on to Kate, if I can, please.
Hello, thank you. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm probably going to echo a lot of what Tom has raised, and thankfully that's good because we're working together to improve and develop our adult skills offer in Salford. I think that the first thing for me is adults are absolutely crucial to address this skills shortage, and the challenges that we face and adults face is the myriad, the breadth of the curriculum offer, the difference in every individual adult's level of attainment, and that lack of a sort of national, potentially a sort of a national overarching strategy to show adults what they can do and where they can go. I think as well, it's really important to say from a college point of view, we offer a curriculum that allows adults to retrain, to upskill in a vocational area that they're already engaged with, to apply, get on a course that will allow them to access university. But we're also very keen to celebrate learning in and of itself, because we know that just the act of learning means that people will gain confidence, they develop their aspirations, and I think something that perhaps isn't always mentioned is the value of an adult learner developing their skills, whatever those skills may be, whether it's literacy, numeracy, English, maths, an access to university course, a level 1 vocational course in business, any of those things is the value that will have on the people that are around them as well. So again, it's not just that individual who will benefit, but the society around them will. So their peers, their family members, their children, the act of them re-engaging with learning will have a significant effect. Tom's mentioned the value of partnerships. We talk a lot in college about this ecosystem, the need to ensure that all of our partners are aware of what we offer, and we are also aware of what our partners are telling us we need to offer. So that could be informed by employers, that could be informed by the local authority. We work very closely with the local authority in terms of identifying where the skills gaps are, that's absolutely fantastic. We've put on and deliver provision that responds to what Salford is saying it needs. But at the same time, we recognise that, I think there's a question later on, but we recognise that there are also adults who are at the very, very, very first stages of their learning journey. And so we need to make sure that we provide that provision. And again, that multi-agency response is absolutely integral to us providing the right advice and guidance and referring and supporting adult learners into educational programmes, which may not be with the college. You know, it's about providing that advice and guidance that will support those adult learners into what it is that will help them for the future. Finally, we're very, very, very passionate about adult skills. I myself, I began life as an English teacher and ESOL teacher. I taught in the community. And I also think I would like to raise, and we've talked about this as well with our local authority, the impact that some of our students who are English, who study ESOL with us, we do a lot of work in terms of supporting those students to bring skills that they already have and want to develop to the city of Salford.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate, for your contribution there. Can I bring Paul in, please?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here, and thanks for the invite to come and talk. Found it really interesting, the first half of it, listening around the green skills side, because my business is probably not quite as green skill, but it's something that, and listening to the comments about what's a green job and what isn't. So that found fascinating. To fill you in a little bit, from my perspective, our business is based within Bradford, and it was interesting to hear Imran start off with his comments about what Bradford is doing, because it has made a significant difference. I think more so at the minute around the young people. I think it's really interesting now about getting into the adult education side of it, because we've done a huge amount and we've got some really powerful tools that we use around apprenticeships and about getting young people through, not just in apprentices, but into jobs. I sit on several of the boards that link into Skills House, which Imran alluded to earlier, and I think that's been absolutely brilliant for Bradford, because one of my frustrations as a business was being hit by about 20 directions of people all trying to tell you this is what you need to do, we need to do this, we need to do that, and none of them actually having all the tools to make it work. And I think that's one of the real powerhouses of what Bradford's doing, and I'm really pleased that we can have a chance to share some of that with you today. The colleges in Bradford, I think, are absolutely crucial. We have 3 key colleges that work with us. We have Keighley, Bradford and Shipley that are all a major part of the local environment and the ability to train. And that's one of the things we've got to look at. If I wanted help from the city, which was a question, how do I get it? It's getting, how do we get that into them communities? Bradford is a hugely diverse city. It's brilliant. It's one of the most amazing places. But we need support from a business and college perspective in getting in and sort of explaining the career paths that can be there. What can we do? How can we help them? And I think there's a twofold element to that, because there's a lot of people talking about the future. And Nav earlier was very good on what's going to be happening in 10 years' time. And for colleges and universities as well, that's one of the biggest difficulties, because to be on mark of what's going to happen in the future, the investment that's needed is phenomenal, because the industry and where it's going, if you want to be able to teach what's going to happen 10 years from now, even if you know what it is, you need huge costs to do that. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges. But there's a twofold side to that, because what's the here and now? We need people in businesses now, and we need to get that training in there. The way the world's going at the minute, the changes to the world, what's happening, there is now a lot of reshoring of manufacturing back into the UK, the problems with the global logistics supply chain, the problem with what's happening in China, what's happening with the war in Ukraine. People are now wanting to have their parts nearer to home, and we're finding that, and we're having to readapt our business, and it means we're having to do not just our main core skills that we've got a strategic apprentice program for, but we've other work now that we need to be able to support. So we've got to have that instant fix of new people maybe just want to come up a level, need to learn some things that they've never had. And that's where I think businesses and colleges must work together. My probably final point, one of the biggest problems, and it sort of irks me to say it, but businesses and their acceptance that they have to work on this. I go to a lot of business conventions and it drives me insane. You sit there and they say, well, I can't get any staff. There's no staff out there. So you say, what's your apprentice program like? I've one of them. Are you working with local communities to get people in? Well, it should be there. I don't know why I have to be doing it. I just want people. And we have to get that more businesses to understand that they're not just going to appear. It's going to need a lot of hard work from the businesses as well. There's some really powerful ones in Bradford, and we're one of them that are working really hard to help that development process. But we need more businesses on board, and that it frustrates me that people can't see that. I end up in quite a lot of debates at varying events when somebody starts telling me that, well, I just need staff. You know, you've got to help. He said everyone's got to be in partnership to do that. And that's it, really, Imran. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Paul. That's again, agree with all that, and obviously thank you for the work that you do in Bradford as well with Skills House and with our partners as well. And finally, I've got more to answer that first question.
Thanks, Imran. It's good being the last one to answer the question because everybody's answered the question. So I'll just, rather than echoing what everybody said, which is absolutely correct, is to just say and share. I mean, I think one of the reasons this conference is so powerful is that we're sharing good practice and best practice, and that's how we improve things. And I think in Salford, we have some phenomenal best practice. We're nowhere near where we want to be, but we're on a journey. And I think what Tom said and what Kate said, and if I can illustrate to you, and from my fundamental point as to what we do here in Salford with Skill City and Host, is that it's about incentivization. It's about incentivization for the citizen. And when I mean incentivization, I mean clarity. I mean the surety of there is going to be an outcome to this learning. There is line of sight, really, really important, especially when we are working with our communities where we're taking people from zero to hero. It's very important there is surety and direction of travel. Incentivization, as Paul rightly said, for employers to commit to that apprenticeship, to commit to ensuring that they are going to employ local and they are going to take people from those diverse backgrounds to be then future leaders into their organization. So just to illustrate how we do this here, we've got Skill City here. This year, we will put 1,000+ people into tech career starts. And I just talked from a tech prism because that's our absolute speciality and that's what we focus on here at Media City. And the way we do that is we're working with Kate at Salford College. And we're working with their level 3 apprentices that are in the classroom, that are doing ESOL. And what we do there is we give those pathways, because let's be honest, sometimes employers will see those level 3s and those classroom certifications, so well, they're not quite ready. They're very sort of wet. They're still not, ready for us to get into that specialist level 4+. So what we do with our 7 digital skills boot camps is we say, right, that's not a problem. That individual will then transition into the skills boot camp. And as Tom said, we then fast track them into that specialist level 4 start. So we become a conductor to the system, not a competitor, but a conductor. And the employer then is fully incentivized to then engage and recruit from that, because we're giving them a quality of a candidate that they would never have ever expected. And that's to no cost to them. And this is why we're connecting the Department for Education's investment into skills, digital skills in boot camps, level 3 apprenticeships with National Skills Adult Funding, as well as those apprenticeships that go from level 4 to level 6. And our partnerships with the University of Salford and other universities can take that individual all the way through to a degree apprenticeship, 0 to hero. And that is how you connect the system. And that individual who used to be a hairdresser, taxi driver, working in a low-paid job, career changes, those mums who had to give up their careers for their families, wanting to come back into the economy, to be doing something of real substance and value. Those are the people that we then incentivize and give them. And every single one learner that we take through is guaranteed an interview. Guaranteed. There is not learning in that sense without an outcome. It is absolutely guaranteed that they will have an interview with an employer with a job or an apprenticeship start. Because fundamentally in our communities, that incentivization should be that you know, we see education as a period of life. Education is a lifelong endeavor, and teachability is the core skill. We think tech is core skill. Tech is not core skill. And can I say that very clearly? People think tech is about delivering core skills. Tech will change tomorrow. There will be some other technology that will come in, and those are tools that people will need to learn. Core skills are sometimes the skills that, when I speak to our moms, we have female-only boot camps. By the way, 41% of our cohort are female, 17% are in tech, we do 41%. When I speak to them, they're holding down 2 jobs. They've got 3 children, they're single parents. They're doing our boot camps in the evenings because we run them at different times so that it's flexible for them to engage with that. And you know what I say to them? I say to them, extol the virtues of being a mom. All these skills that you have are all absolutely sought after by the employer. You're now learning a tool that's going to make you even more phenomenal as a talent. But sometimes we, because of society, because of disadvantage, because of circumstance, all of those skills, those core skills that are present in our communities. And I think this is why I'm so proud to be working in Salford and the key cities around that as well, is that we have the best potential. We have that talent, those gems that are sitting there in our communities. All we do is just basically put them into a space where they're very visible and they have the courage and the confidence to translate that talent. We have 64,000 vacancies in tech this minute, costing the economy 6 billion per annum. Now that is not about the future and about next, it's about now. And if we can do this, and we're doing this, like I said, currently, we're going to be able to actually unlock all of that potential that exists, working collaboratively, giving incentive to the learner. We give them choice. You don't want to go into coding, go into data analyst, go and become a creative. Like Tom said, we are moving massively into the game tech and esports agenda. And this is about getting those people understanding that it's not all about coding. It's not all about this sort of very difficult sort of, you know, technology. Your core skills, analytical skills, problem solving skills, creative skills are the ones that employers are really desperately seeking. We teach them the tools and away they go. And we've got examples of people who've been hairdressers and now cyber analysts earning £55,000 a year.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Mo. And that final point actually is the title of this conference. You know, it's never too late. The opportunities are always there. We just need to make sure that people have access to them. I have been very generous on time because I was hoping that you'd all do that first question in 2 to 3 minutes each. And I think in another 3 minutes, we're supposed to be opening up to wider audience participation. So I might start to mix things up a little bit. I hope Lottie doesn't mind me doing that. So, I've got a list of questions that I also want to get through as well. So I'm going to mix the next question with one of ours and one with an audience one. They are quite similar. So my next question is, what are the most effective approaches for upskilling and reskilling people from hard to reach communities? And I think linked to that, we have an audience question as well from Graham, Head of Finance at Mustard Tree, who says, what new programmes do you think need to be developed to address individuals who live in poverty within high unemployment areas? So hard to reach groups, probably those furthest away from the labour market. So we'll start with Kate on that one, please, if I can.
I think going back to what we talked about in the first question, hard to reach groups, you know, if we find the complexity of the funding and the provision complicated and a little difficult, then I think it's about empathising with somebody who hasn't even got that extra layer of understanding or knowledge in terms of where they should go, who they should see, what is even available to them. So the first thing is, obviously, I mean, we're very committed to this from a college point of view. We have a community education programme as part of our adult skills offer. So the first thing is about creating a curriculum that is accessible, that will provide those first small steps into engaging with learning in and of itself. The second thing is about that multi-agency approach. So if we do have vulnerable adults who are working with other agencies, that they are in a position to be able to signpost, provide that advice and guidance that might support an adult into an education programme or refer them to in another direction. I think what we generally find, and this I'm talking from a college point of view and from our, you know, our work with stakeholders, is that engagement, once it happens, is the absolute key. It's very rare that once an adult or an adult learner, it's very, very rare that once they engage, in spite, you know, and they've got lots of commitments and all of those things, it's very rare that we lose them again. So it's that first point of engagement, providing that safe space for someone to access learning or skills development in a way that will show them what they can go on to achieve.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate, for that response. Paul, can I bring you in to answer that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we're trying to do in Bradford around the skills house, and I think if we're going to add a little bit more to it, it's engaging more with the community leaders and trying to get them more involved in an understanding of what businesses are available within the district and the amount of different career paths that are available within it. And I think the key way to get into there is through the community leaders and the events that we can hit with that. I mean, Bradford's so diverse, not just as a community, but in terms of its workforce. We're quite unique in the fact that Bradford is over 70, I think it's only 80% SMEs. We don't have the big companies that a lot of the other sort of cities have near them. We don't have the big industries around us. Probably Morrison's been in maybe the exception, but the rest of it is all small businesses, which are so many different. I talk to so many people that are doing, and you're fascinating what they can do, and all of them have the same problem. So it's how do we, for me, it's we've got to find ways. There's so many different skills that we need to bring into the city, and it's getting into the communities. I'm absolutely passionate about that, and I think colleges are a key part of that. Certainly Bradford, Keighley and Shipley are doing a huge amount around working within the community. A lot of what Kate's just said there, the same things are happening with them, and that's a real powerful tool to get in there, because we've got a lot of young people in there, and it's maybe trying to use some of them young people to talk to their parents who maybe haven't got a job and say, you know, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? There's ways around like that. Have probably been my answer on it.
Well, thank you for that, Paul. I'm not going to ask you all to answer every question now, because we've got quite a lot to get through, and we've got some questions coming through thick and fast as well. So I'm going to move on to another question now, and that is a passion of mine, actually, about an all-age career service that we've been talking about for quite a while. So the question is, what blocks need to be removed to create opportunities for skills development in all age groups? And linked to that as well, we've got a question from Jessica Patek, who is saying, what are the best ways to engage with older workers who feel they are too old to learn? And we'll go to Tom for that question, please.
Yeah, thanks, Imran. And I think some of that's linked to the previous question about hard to reach groups as well, really, because I suppose my kind of challenge contention in all of this is, you know, to be frank, it's the system that's broken. I don't think, in all honesty, many of those groups we've talked about, including older learners, adult learners, I don't think they are hard to reach groups at all. I think we know who they are, we know where they are, we know where they live in Salford. We know that in a fairly granular level of detail from all our multi-agency engagement with them, through engagement with providers, through, you know, knowledge of our neighbourhoods and our wards and so on. The issue is that the infrastructure around that engagement is fractured, fragmented, broken and underinvested in. For me, the key answer on the adult side is the brokerage capacity that I talked about at the start, Imran. It's what's been decimated as part of the last kind of 10, 15 years of fracturing and underinvestment in the post-19 world of education and training in particular. And I think where authorities are approaching that imaginatively, they are, as we are in Salford, deliberately taking a bit of a risk and quite a big hit on our revenue budget to reinvest in exactly that kind of capacity, which will provide a greater critical mass wrapped around a kind of integrated IAG function, to enable adult retraining and outreach to become much, much more of the norm. And it links back, I think, Imran, to that broader issue, which is about cities that take this agenda seriously, are cities that are prepared, as we are in Salford, to go out on the stump and talk about adult education as something that has to become fashionable again. And, you know, that's a very kind of crude shorthand for, you know, what is a very sophisticated programmatic approach through the City College who've been talking this morning, through everything we're investing in Host and Skills City and more besides, and ultimately through what, you know, those key nodes of economic growth that are absolutely booming in Greater Manchester, including Media City and the Keys, including the Crescent and Salford University and the whole innovation zone around them. They have to be appealing, they have to be accessible areas of employment, not just for young people, but for adults alike. But if you don't have the brokerage infrastructure that's able to, you know, almost kind of client manage and handhold people through exactly that kind of fractured, Byzantine, complex, confusing, etc. system you described at the outset, Imran, you're on a hiding to nothing. It's difficult and it's expensive work. We're not sitting on our hands in the city of Salford thinking that government is going to come to the rescue in a hurry on that. And we're one of the local authorities, like you are over in Bradford, who are prepared to put our money where our mouth is and invest in that area of activity through our revenue budget. We're not pretending by any means that that investment is going to paper over all of the cracks and solve the systemic problem. But, you know, I'll come back to my contention at the start, Imran, that I don't think adult learners and many of those groups in our most deprived neighbourhoods are hard to reach. I think they're quite easy to reach, but the critical issue is we don't have the infrastructure or the capacity to do that outreach as effectively as we would like. And part of the contribution to fixing that is from the council, but it has to be a broader partnership approach. And I would say government absolutely has to come with us on that journey.
Thank you for that answer, Tom. I mean, that kind of touches a little bit on my next question, which is what else can government do to develop a thriving skills for life culture across the UK? I'm going to go to more on that question if I can.
I think we'll run out of time on that one, Imran, because I think it's one of those. Yeah. But I think practically, again, going back to the fact that we've had too many policy changes, too many times new initiatives, new iterations of the, you know, sort of recycling of something different, and all of a sudden that sort of changes the landscape. And particularly for local authorities, it's an absolute nightmare to try and navigate and where the money is coming in, because I think the problem is money comes in unilaterally, directly, which people don't even aware that that's coming in. There's money that's coming in with sort of caveat, and that's not working for the context of the region. And really what the government should be doing, and we know this, is true devolution. Every local authority, every community, Tom's right, you know your community. I mean, why are you here? If you're not, you know, your civic institutions, if you don't know your community, you shouldn't be in your job. And all this sort of thing about, you know, we don't know who they are and whether, and it's the same about young people. And I'm sorry, I mean, I run, you know, a major multi-academy trust. If you don't know your community, you should not be in your business. If you don't know your children and where they come from, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. So that's, you know, one fundamental. But I would just say that government, to whatever its devices, confuse the hell out of things, and the money then becomes the objective. You know, it's that sort of following the money. It's happened in the digital skills bootcamp as well. You know, putting tenders out to organizations who have no vested interest in the community, but just to take that money just to basically be able to run their businesses. How disingenuous is that? Because all you're doing is just funding a commercial or somebody's sort of business activity. I would test anybody to say, how much are you connected to the place? And we say that to our businesses when they come and work with us, because we have three fundamentals: humanize the technology, belonging to the place, and the culture with which you do this. And the belonging is fundamental. Are you here for the long term? Or are you just taking advantage of an opportunity that's here today? And that's the measure of success, because I believe consistent approaches, consistently doing the same thing that is working, will prove dividend. Stop, start, every cycle of a political sort of, government, every cycle of a political calendar, every cycle of a funding stream, that money runs out, then you go to another initiative, then a new initiative comes in. And for particularly people of disadvantage, people who are struggling to make, just life happen, and I'll give you one example, and I need to share this because this is the reality of why we do what we do. We work across 800 schools to deliver a program called Cyber First for young girls in disadvantaged schools to inspire them into STEM and tech, and there's bursaries that the national government provides into that as well. And when we run courses in our disadvantaged communities, you know what we do? We don't necessarily focus on the tech and everything else. We put a phenomenal lunch on, and a phenomenal tea, and a phenomenal breakfast. And you know why that is? Because so many of those kids for the rest of the week will be on pot noodles. And for the reason that they can come, and they can come because they can actually feel like, they've eaten food that they'd never expect to eat at home. And for that incentive, for them to come back again and then be interested in the tech, you don't start with the tech, you start with the individual and understand and empathize. Kate's absolutely right. If you can't see empathy, you shouldn't be in this business. And local authorities should evaluate their partners and providers on that basis to say, are you truly here for us in this long term with empathy? Do you have that intent to commit to the place? Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to do what you need to do. And it's disingenuous to present a story that look at us and look at what we've done when you're not committed to the fundamentals, and it's attritional. I always say to people, if this was easy, anybody could do it. You cannot take this approach without knowing that this is attritional, but you keep at it, and guaranteed, we know this, there's more qualified people than me on this call, where we then see the results. And when we create role models from our communities, if you can't be it, you can't see it, you can't be it. Those role models, in all our boot camps, you know what we do? We have role models. We have people who are from that community, speak the language, look like them, from them, 50 plus, hijab wearing, from minority background. They're the ones that inspire, not me sitting here saying, oh, this is a great opportunity. And that's what we have to organically create, role models who will then inspire a generation.
Thank you for that answer, Mark. I mean, that's a really interesting point, and obviously for us, that's something that we've been pushing as well. People need to be able to see themselves in the communities that they live in, to give them that confidence to move forward, to say, well, if they can do it, I can do it as well. So yeah, that's a really, really important point. Okay, can I bring you in to answer this question as well, please, just in terms of what more can government do, and what can we expect from government?
I mean, in one sense, I welcome the skills strategy, because it's put the need to engage with adults and have adults as, I really think that's a real positive. It's the first time that adults have been mentioned in such detail for a very, very long time. So I welcome that. We are very pleased, very positive about the life skills guarantee courses at level 3. That's great. But obviously, not everybody is at a level where they can access that level 3. So in terms of government strategy, I would welcome a review to look at, a lower level of qualification that is accessible and free for all, because I think that money and ability to commit to a course is a significant barrier. And so if you're anxious about enrolling on something, joining something, and it's not free, even if you want to join a course which is absolutely linked to a skills need in the city, and it's not free, that might be the first point at which you say, oh, it's not for me. I've got other commitments, I'm going to go do something else. So in general, I really welcome the strategy, the skills strategy in particular, but I would welcome, and obviously we have a devolved adult education budget here, which again has led to us to be able to contribute more effectively to what we can and can't deliver and what is free. So I welcome that flexibility as well. But I would also welcome, against all of that, a sort of national campaign which really tries to engage with adults who may not think it's even a thing for them. They may not even know it's on the, that it's possible for them to go back to college or go back to join a boot camp or, that kind of thing. So I think a sort of a national campaign as well.
Well, thank you for that, Kate, as well. So I'm going to ask the last question before I ask you all to come back in and sum up very quickly. So how do we incentivize people? And I think this has been answered in part, but I just want to link it to one of the audience questions as well. So how do we incentivize people to embrace lifelong learning? What will be the consequences for the UK economy if we don't scale up our ambition in this area? And that ties in, I think, with a question from Peter Rogerson from Salford. And he asks, what do the panel think are the main barriers to get people to learn new skills, embrace learning for life? And I'm going to ask you all to answer this question. So I'll just go around in the order I've got it on my screen. So Paul, if I can ask you to start, please.
Yeah, I think in terms of the consequences, and I'll hit that one first from a business perspective, we have to get these people into these roles. There is, everywhere you go, you're seeing there's a shortage of people, and we're going to lose, certainly within industry, work to Europe, because the work is coming back to this continent. We'll say this continent, and if we're not ready with the people in place to do it, then that work will end up going into Europe, and we've missed an opportunity. It's a one-off hit, is this, where the world is changing due to the circumstances that are there, and we've got to be at the forefront ready to do that. We're having to adapt and bring in parts we've never made before, because that's what the markets are wanting. They're wanting the supply base close to home, and we're in aerospace. A lot of our parts are aerospace, but ours is around getting the parts for the likes of Airbus and even Boeing, which sort of a bit of a contradiction, but the UK is on Boeing's list of growth countries that they want to work with. They're exiting their Chinese suppliers, and they're looking at places that will do it. And we have to get people quickly to them levels. We've got to find some way to make it so that we can incentivize and give them that opportunity. I mean, there's people far more talented than I am that can talk about how we get the money and how we do that kind of thing. All I want really is to help get them people into them jobs. So I'll pass the rest of it on to the others, to be honest.
Well, thank you, Paul. Mo?
I think, like I said before, I think it's the surety of the outcome. Too often, too much has been presented to individuals with the promise of something, and it doesn't materialize. And that's an indictment, because if one person doesn't achieve it, the rest of the community looks at them and said, look, that was a waste of time. So why are you bothering even? And it's true. And we must be sure. And this is why we guarantee, it's not about the learning in the bouquet, it's a guarantee of the job. And we make sure that people are prepared for that and are incentivized to say, this is a good job. It's going to change your life. It's going to be revolutionary, something that you're passionate about. But this is the other thing. It's not herding sheep. Every person's individual talent needs to be mapped to that particular opportunity so that they can succeed. A lot of times you get them in a job and then a month later they leave. And what's the point of that? You've got to work so hard to orientate somebody's passion, somebody's natural talent, empathize with the barriers. And this is so true, that what you don't know is what you don't know. It's not what you know, but what you don't know, that is the real problem. And people just don't know what's available. And if you work with them, and that's what we do intensely over those 3 months that we work with them, to make sure that what they are now going into is something that they know is going to be successful for them. I do not believe that this is a situation that we should take with a let's do it and things will happen type of, sort of laissez-faire sort of mentality. Well, we have to work with each individual to each opportunity in a direct fashion. That's the only way that we can surefire see success. And once success happens in a community, word spreads. People then, I don't believe anybody doesn't want the best for themselves. It's just that they don't know what best looks like. And this is the fundamental truth of it. They will only pursue what they believe is best. And there's so much in our communities that they don't know about. I mean, we sit in Media City, which is global opportunities, but there are people who just would not know that, not to any fault of their own. It's about us ensuring that they do realize that this is something that they can do and ensure success. And for us, it's that high skill job opportunities, starting point apprenticeship through our fast track skills bootcamp. So then they will see that journey properly. And that's the currency that we trade on.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Mo, as well. I think the key word there for me really was sustainability, to make sure that it's long-term and not a short-term thing. I'm just conscious of time. So, Kate, if I can go to you next and ask you to keep it very short, because I just want you to all sum up for a minute at the end as well.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously the consequences, the impact on the economy, our failure to grow, but more, perhaps I shouldn't say this, but the missed opportunity now. We have opportunities and we have people. So to not address this and with urgency and a real commitment is to miss the opportunity for the individual, and then the impact that the progress of that individual will have on their peers, community, families. So that's, for me, it's an absolute priority. In terms of barriers, I think I'm probably saying the same thing. Experience of education may have been poor, money, commitments. I get all of those things, but again, I go back to, in our experience, if you get that person onto our training program, whatever that may be, and it's good quality and it's innovative and it recognises and understands the challenges and empathises with what that adult learner may be going through, or maybe barriers, those barriers fall away. So, everybody has commitments, etc. But I think it's about understanding who we're working with and providing that very clear pathway. Surety, yes, absolutely. Show them where they can go to next.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Kate. And finally, Tom, and if I could ask you at the end of your question to start summing up, and then we'll go back in reverse order. But we've got 4 minutes.
Yep, no problem. I'll be very brief. I could talk for hours about this, but it would annoy the hell out of you, Imran, so I'll resist the temptation. In terms of incentivisation, I mean, the simple thing for me is devolve the system, upscale the funding in the system, and improve people's ability to navigate it. It's where the brokerage stuff comes in, links directly to everything that Mo's talked about brilliantly, I think. And that's the key thing, is make it less complicated for people to get around it. I think there's a wider cultural issue in all of this, which is probably my key point in summing up as well, Imran, which is I think the other critical thing for incentivising lifelong learning in the system is for people to see leaders at all levels of the community being proud to be lifelong learners themselves. And I think the key for me is that we have to get back to a situation in this country where we wear with great pride the whole principle, ethos, philosophy and pedagogy of adult education. It's one of the most important drivers of ongoing economic success and economic development. And frankly, whether you're doing that in order to get from A to B in your career, or you're doing it simply for a kind of strange mind expanding experience, it is all worthwhile. It adds colour, vitality, diversity to economies and places. And I think as leaders, we should all be very, very proud and very loud and proud about that, and make that a virtue in our cities. Thanks.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. Kate?
Yeah, I think that for me, the overriding sort of priority for us from a college point of view and for the city of Salford is to celebrate lifelong learning, to provide those opportunities for adults, because success, will lead to success. And I don't mean that necessarily in financial prosperity, just the development of all of those skills and confidences that will help an adult learner in the future. So in summary, that's what I would like to just restate our intent and our commitment to that focus.
Brilliant, thank you. And Mo?
Yeah, I think my sort of overarching sort of focus is demand led. I think this misalignment of supply of talent to the demand that the employer space or the economy is looking for, I think that's now no longer sort of acceptable. We work with employers and the demand that the economy is now showing and the sort of strengths of our economy, and then really harnessing that into the talent provision and the development of the skills and the ability for those people to access those local jobs and opportunities within their geo region. And I say geo region, but I do also say that now in a global virtual world that we live in, you know, the world is more accessible for people with talent and the tools to be able to function for that. So but I think, you know, the leadership within the economy must be demand-led now to say, look, you know, let's orientate what we have jobs for, what we're investing in, and for that, you know, community to be able to directly access that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bo. It's quite interesting actually to say that, but when I'm looking at my screen, I see you and I see Paul, and I think between the two of you, virtually and physically, you are literally taking people around the world with the work that you both do. And Paul, finally, if you could, 30 seconds, please. You got your mute on, Paul, sorry. We almost got through an hour with nobody
really
doing
did it.
that.
I had to be the one that let everyone down. Apologies. Just taking up something Mo said, whatever skills you're going to put in people, whatever you're going to do, make sure that they enjoy it, because that is so important. And that's one of the mantras of our company. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, then either we're doing something wrong or there's something wrong in the role that you're in. So for me, you know, keep doing what we're doing with Skills House in Bradford, Imran. Let's keep that going. Let's get more colleges doing that, more cities doing that, because that is a real good driver. It looks like Salford have got something similar. I think that's about 30 seconds, and I'll shut up now.
No, that's brilliant, Paul. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to take 30 seconds and then I'm going to hand back over to John if I can. I just want to thank the panel, actually, each and every one of you, Tom, Kate, Paul and Mo, for your contributions. I've been really impressed, actually, with both the questions asked, but also the responses provided. I think it's been a really enlightening discussion that will help shape the future direction of our work around skills, which we will share with government ministers to help focus their work in ensuring everyone has access to possible opportunities, so where we can create an environment where people can actually succeed and ensure that no one is left behind. I'm just going to end on highlighting the importance of a more locally focused work that needs to be done, where partnerships are key. It's all our responsibilities. So thank you all for attending today, audience and panel members, and very grateful for your contributions. Thank you all. John, can I hand back over to you?
You can indeed. I'm struck by Paul's remark there that whatever you do, make sure you enjoy it. It's part of my contention that local government can actually be fun, and that what we do is actually about giving joy to our communities and positive nature to our communities, and that's very much what I've got out of this. Thanks to Councillor Khan, Tom, Kate, Mo and Paul for an absolutely fascinating discussion. I think it's a sign that we don't feel we've had enough time at this conference to discuss all the issues that have emerged. That's normally the sign of a successful conference, when we feel that if only we'd had more time, we could have utilised it. But I want to assure people that this isn't the end of what's going to actually happen, because we're determined as a Key Cities Network, along with Councillor Khan, to deliver on what needs to be done in this country. Part of our argument to government is that if only you give us the tools, we can do the job. And that's one of the observations I've drawn from this meeting and drawn from this conference, and about how we actually need to affect our parliamentary lobbying work. And we have a very successful Key Cities All Parliamentary Group, which is going to have as its next focus the whole skills agenda and about how we can more effectively lobby government to deliver on this. I believe there's been an awful lot of ideas expressed here, which I want to take up. I want to thank Councillor Khan in particular, for whose brainchild this was. This has been a tremendously successful conference for the network, and something we can build on. I also want to thank ING, which have been behind the scenes sort of paddling frantically to keep the conference on the road and make sure we kept to time. So thank you for that, and to the Secretariat for the organisational effort they put into it. So this is a start of a process. As Chairman Mao once said, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single footstep. And I think what we've done is bring together both practitioners in the area and people who can influence government to try and get them to understand that the more devolution they give us, the more ability to deliver in our local communities, the more effective we are going to be as a country. So thanks all of you for attending, and I look forward to this being the start of a major debate that needs to take place with government about delivering their agenda. So thank you very much.